Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Dear friends, this is a continuation of our day-long program in honor of the Arahant Bhikkhuni, Sanghamitta, and her tremendous success as a teacher and a missionary, bringing Buddhism to Sri Lanka. I'm going to, for the next chapter in this tale, I'm going to show you a talk that was given by the Abbess of Dhammadharini, Ayatataloka.
Namora Dhanataya. Walking in the footsteps of great Terry Sanghamitta, offered in commemoration of the Sanghamitta Day full moon. Kalyanamitta, both by day and by night. Buddha highly recommended looking often to good role models and developing skill in contemplating them, both for his left-home monastic and householder disciples, commending the qualities of his luminary disciples of all four parisa or assemblies. Each was considered noble, meaningful, and worthy of remembrance. This is truly one of the great treasures of Buddhism, it being, in its ancient traditions, rich with role models of fully awakened and self-liberated women sages, leaders, teachers, and exemplars of all walks of life. Early Buddhist teachings might be unparalleled in world traditions in this regard. These teachings, examples, and practices are full of power, capable of coming alive in our lives when we turn our minds and hearts towards them. I found the polytext Buddhist traditions to be especially rich in records of great awakened women, from their teachings and their hagiographies in the polytext canon to their life stories in the polytext commentaries, and in the polytext chronicles passed down in Sri Lanka, where we find the life stories of such great women after the time of the Buddha, most well known among them the princess daughter of the Emperor Ashoka, the great Bhikkhuni Sanghamitta, who we commemorate today. In the Sinhala Polytext Chronicles, such as the Dipavamsa, Mahavamsa, and Mahabodhivamsa, Sanghamitta Teri's story is embedded within the story of another great lady, sometimes said to be Sri Lanka's first Arahant, Anula Devi. Often called Queen Anula, she was the Uparani or vicereign of Sri Lanka. Anula Devi, while listening to the Buddha's teachings from the Satya Samyutta as taught by the Arahant Mahindathera shortly after he arrived, realized stream entry one day and then stream winning the next day. She then requested ordination into the monastic Sangha. Not only Anula Devi, but hundreds of ladies of the royal household and of her entourage who joined her gained insight and entered the Arahant path listening to the Dhamma together. The chronicles record 1,000 women who asked to enter monastic life. At this point, the images here are all still imagination. Anula Devi expressed her wish to enter monastic life to her husband the viceroy, who expressed this to the king, who in turn expressed it to their teacher, the great Arahant Mahinda. It's noteworthy that at no point is Anula Devi denied in this story, nor disparaged and told she is being arrogant, nor that she'd better support the male Sangha and be reborn as a man, nor that she should await the future Buddha Maitreya. Rather, the Venerable Mahinda Thero recommends calling upon his sister, a bhikkhuni of great wisdom, Sanghamitta, also mentioning a number of other bhikkhunis of exemplary qualities by name, recommending them to come as well. And he asked for the Sri Mahabodhi, the tree under which the Buddha was awakened, to come. Arrangements were set in motion. This then sets the stage for the story of Sanghamitta Theri's journey. Let us now follow in her footsteps. We begin at the feet of the Sri Mahabodhi tree, under which the Buddha was awakened, with the Emperor Ashoka establishing a cutting of the southern branch, Sanghamitta having announced her acceptance of the mission. Overview of the land and river route through India on the left, and the sea route on the right. After a week of travels in India and then a week at shore preparing, during which the Sri Mahabodhi sapling was ritually coronated, the great company's sea voyage was launched on the first day of the brightening half of the month of Magasira in Pali. This great painting from Wat Po in Bangkok, Thailand, depicts Sanghamitta and the Sri Mahabodhi tree's journey, showing the great launching on the Indian side. We see Sanghamitta in the upper left, the Emperor Ashoka's departing homage to the Bodhi tree on the lower left, and then in the bottom center, the Emperor Ashoka going into the water to lift up the Bodhi tree and raise it into the ship in which Sanghamitta Theri, the bhikkhunis, and the whole mission have already boarded, followed by their departure in the upper right. Here we see in the upper right, and in the insert, more famously, Sri Lankan King Devanam Piyatissa, deep in the water, receiving the Sri Mahabodhi tree sapling on the Sri Lankan side, as per the Mahavamsa. The great reception in Sri Lanka in multiple stages along the journey is depicted here, from the northern seacoast at the Jambukola port, and in 5 stages along the way to Anuradhapura. The great reception has been perhaps the most evocative scene in the Sri Lankan consciousness in the past 2 centuries, repeated countless times. One of the most famous depictions is the noble and magnificent great wall mural of the ancient Kelaniya Raja Mahavihara by artist Solius Mendes, whose beautiful paintings fill this temple's galleries. This image in gold of the Great Reception is enshrined inside the reliquary Chaitya at Sumatipala Meditation Center in Sri Lanka. The beautiful and graceful contemporary Sri Lankan image featured in our commemorative program today. Last year, when I found this image in a Google image search, I could only find one. This year, they have spread widely. How inspiration spreads. Sanghamitta's journey from Jambukola port to the ancient capital of Anuradhapura in Sri Lanka, an overview and close-up of the beginning of the Sri Lankan journey. First stop, port of Jambukola. This commemorative site was recently re-established after the original ancient Samudradhana Sala site was lost. Second stop along the journey, per Sri Lankan traditions, the Sri Bodhi Dakshinarama in Vaunia along the Kandy Jaffna Highway. Third stop is an overnight at the ancient Tantrimale Raja Mahavihara, formerly known as the village of the Brahmin Tiwanka and Mahawangsa, the painting on site shows Brahman Tiwanka planting one of the first 8 fruits of the Sri Mahabodhi tree, still alive there today. Stop 4. The Pachinatisa Vihara. Per the Mahabodhivangsha Chronicle, the final place of Bodhi rest before entering the capital of Anuradhapura. The journey took 4 days. Actually, for the 5th stop, there are 2 traditions. First, the aforementioned stop according to the chronicles, and second, according to local traditions, the ancient Great Northern Road by which the Great Company arrived is none other than the road now called Sanghamitta Mawata, named after Sanghamitta Teri, and the route she took to enter the citadel with the Sri Mahabodhi tree through the northern gate. We show this route here as well. 5th stop continued. The first tradition has Sanghamitta Teri, the Bo tree, and great retinue coming to the Patama Chaitya before entering the citadel by the north gate. This was the site built by King Devanam Piyatissa to mark Mahindathero's first arrival to Anuradhapura. The ancient Patama Chaitya site has recently been lost. We've used old maps here to try and find it again. The second tradition, which has Sanghamitta Teri and the Great Company entering directly via the Great Northern Highway. When mapping Sanghamitta's journey, I noticed that the formerly royally endowed Ashokarama Purana Bhikkhuni Arama near Pangulia village is just to the east of Sanghamitta Mawata Road and just adjacent to the Mawata Oya stream. According to the chronicles, Sanghamitta's ancient monastery where she sought seclusion, previously the Royal Elephants Resort, in a cool area away from the city with flowering kadamba bushes, so named, the Hatalakarama or Hatalaka Vihara, was bordered on by the Mawatu Oya, formerly named Kadamba River. Could this be Sanghamitta Teri's long-lost monastery, her self-chosen secluded dwelling? I also question, due to the proximity to the later-built Abhayagiri Vihara and this Bhikkhunya Rama's 1,000-year history of royal patronage, whether this may also have been the monastery of Tisara Teri, also known as Devasara Teri, who famously traveled by ship from Sri Lanka to China in the 5th century of the Common Era to establish dual ordination for the Chinese Bhikkhuni Sangha. First map here, from the north gate we pass through the citadel and emerge via the south gate, Sanghamitta Mawata Road. The second, we then pass Sanghamitta Stupa. The third, onto Sri Mahabodhi Road. We enter the Jayashree Mahabodhi Court, coming to the end of our journey. Mahindathero and Bhikkhus and King Devanam Piyatissa on left, with Sanghamitta Teri and ladies of the royal household on right, established the Jayashree Mahabodhi in Anuradhapura, with leading families from around the island joining in. The establishment of the Jayashree Mahabodhi lasted for 1 week and was followed by Bhikkhuni ordinations with Anula Devi and co. under Sanghamitta Teri, and Bhikkhu ordinations with Maharita and co. under Mahindathero, after which there came to be many, many arahants of both sanghas in Sri Lanka. The Venerable Jayashree Mahabodhi tree of Anuradhapura, established in 288 BCE. Journey's end for Arahant Sanghamitta. Sanghamitta Stupa was built over great Arahant Teri Sanghamitta's chosen cremation place by King Uddiya in the 9th year of his reign, 203 BCE. She entered Parinibbana 1 year after her brother, the great Arahant Tero Mahinda. She was 79 years old. The location chosen by her for her cremation per the chronicles was to the east of Tuparama and previously within sight of the Jayashree Mahabodhi tree. Journey's end for Anula Devi. The Anula Devi Chaitya, unrestored, in Mahintale area outside Anuradhapura. established in commemoration of Sri Lanka's first Bhikkhuni Arahant, Anula Devi, by Queen Viharamahadevi in the 2nd century BCE. I'd like to offer my special appreciation to Viharamahadevi, a restorer of the traditions of great Arahant Teris Sanghamitta and Anula Devi in Anuradhapura, after they'd been disrupted in the 2nd century BCE. She was a princess, then a queen, and then also became a bhikkhuni in her later life, restoring and then passing on the Dipavamsa tradition of Sadhamavamsa Kovida bhikkhunis, the lineage of bhikkhuni teachers, leaders, and historians of Sri Lanka, which then lasted for more than 1,000 years after her time, and is now once again re-arising. The end of Walking in the Footsteps of Great Terry Sanghamitta. Chirangarakantu loka sasanang. May the right teaching, practice, and fruits of the Buddha's dispensation last long in our world. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. The sound of this recording was a little bit low for the people here in this room, but we'll have a chance to listen to it later. For those who might have an interest in listening to this again, I'll give you the link for this in our YouTube channel. And oops, I'm going to send this to everyone. Yes, and this is, of course, one of the very significant kinds of veneration or puja for the ancestors and for the Buddha and for the enlightened persons that we venerate, to go on pilgrimage to visit the stupa where their mortal remains are entombed, and to visit the places where they taught. So in this way, with our body and with our feet, placing ourselves in the same part of the earth where these great individuals traveled in the past is a way of making the connection more real and more meaningful to us, to embed it in our hearts. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha predicted that the important locations of the great events of his life, his birth, his enlightenment, and his parinirvana, where he taught the first turning of the wheel of Dhamma, that these sites would become places of pilgrimage. And thus the pattern. This perhaps was a more ancient and general pattern in Indian culture, even before the Buddha's time, but it's established in our text, and that model then is followed later on.
May I share something?
Yes, I'm going to welcome Venerable Kachayana.
Yes, I just wanted to give a brief update to that video. There's an exciting development that has come across since that was made, which is at the very end there. She was showing the photos of the Chaitya of Anula Devi, and it was all covered in grass and basically just looked like a little hill with a tree on the top. That has been excavated in the past year. That they've opened that up, they're restoring it, and they found inside it what they think may be the relics of Anula Devi. And there have been these large excavations and large gatherings of like thousands of bhikkhunis going there and circling that site in connection with the excavation and the archaeological study. So it's been very interesting to sort of we get occasional updates on that from Ayatollah on Facebook. She'll share the photos and just to let know that these things are active and being developed and available for pilgrimage if anyone wishes to go there. There's even a new site, new possibility to see it restored. So just wanted to share that as a update.
Thank you. When the full ordination of bhikkhunis was restored in the 1980s, and then further events in the 1990s, the Sri Lanka was the most welcoming and most supportive country in the entire world. Nowadays, the possibility for the full ordination of women as bhikkhunis has become more widely spread worldwide because we now have complete sangha of at least 5 or 10 bhikkhunis existing in many continents in Europe, North America, Australia, India, Thailand, and there's the a presence of teachers who are qualified to be the bhikkhuni preceptor, and there's the presence of bhikkhus who are supportive and willing to participate in doing those ordinations. But back 30 years ago, it was not that easy to find the supportive conditions in the Theravada, but those conditions arose first in Sri Lanka. I had spoken earlier today about the idea of how a few sentences in the founding documents of a nation can have a strong impact on the entire culture of that nation, or a few sentences in the early text of a religious tradition can have a profound impact on the shape of that. In this case, it seems that the imagery, the picture of Sanghamitta bringing the Bodhi tree across the water in the boat, carrying the Bodhi tree, which is the symbol of Buddhism, and giving it to the king or the viceroy of Sri Lanka, that just that image has had a very powerful imprint on the psychology of Sri Lanka. It's a sort of seems to have a similar place as the Statue of Liberty, as in the USA. Especially there's the one painting in particular where she's at the prow of the boat, lifting up the Bodhi tree, and it is very much like the Statue of Liberty. It's said that throughout the history of Sri Lanka, the role and status of women was more respected, more equal, with greater rights and greater latitude than in other parts of Asia. The subordination or the oppression of women seems to be a pattern that happened not only in ancient India, but also worldwide, including also in Europe, during the, you could say during the Common Era, after 1000 up to recent historical times. But throughout this entire period, women in Sri Lanka were able to own property. They were able to inherit property. They were able to divorce at will. They were able to have be the owners of a business. They were able to travel freely. And in addition, then having that opportunity for many hundreds of years to have the full ordination. So then when the ordination of the bhikkhunis was restored in the, when the ordination of nuns as 10 precept nuns was restored in Sri Lanka at the early years of the 20th century, that development was deeply welcomed and became tied up in the national identity of that country as they shook off the shackles of colonialism and had their independence movement. So a restored commitment to the Dhamma and to Buddhism became connected to the freedom of the country. And the opportunity for women to make the full commitment at the first group was called the Dasa Sila Mata, which is called the Mothers of 10 Precepts. So Dasa, 10, Seal, the precepts, Mata, mother. So the 10 precept mothers. At the beginning, there were many very well-educated, successful women who would enter into that path. Then in the more recent years in our lifetime in Sri Lanka, there was a long movement for what happened was eventually the Dasa Sila Mata, after independence, it seemed like the Dasa Sila Mata lost its high-class associations and became more of a refuge for rural women who didn't have many other choices. So a farmer girl who did not wish to marry and had very few possibilities in life, that then the religious track was their possibility. So then the level of the education of the Dasa Sila Mata nuns went down, although it's also true that according to what we hear, there were outposts where the level of practice, the level of noble accomplishments continued without a break, where there were very deep practitioners who were well supported by very accomplished bhikkhus teachers. and who had their own mastery in the teaching. But there was a movement to give the 10 precept nuns access to the Buddhist education in the Buddhist colleges, to give them a chance to become much more broadly knowledgeable, to learn the Dhamma, learn the Pali language, and become masters in scholarship, as well as having some of the other courtesies that were available at that time to the bhikkhus, even something as simple as being able to ride for free on the public bus, which the bhikkhus had, but the 10 precept nuns did not have. So that movement was something like a restored civil rights movement for women at that time. My Bhikkhuni Acharya, when I had my ordination in 2006, the Venerable Sri Sumangala had been very much involved in those organizing efforts. And she really struck me as having somewhat of the character of the early civil rights workers. She spent years riding the public bus, going from village to village, speaking to rural women with the message, you are able to be accomplished, spiritually accomplished, that you deserve success. And so then that inner transformation of remembering one's human dignity became a kind of a precursor, or something that was necessary when the time came that there was a movement that was influenced also by Western feminism and by other movements to investigate and show that it was possible, legally possible, to restore the full bhikkhuni ordination. And then you have this large and well-organized movement of 10 precept nuns, and they drew the best of the best, the most accomplished, most well-educated, or the most positive, virtuous, well-practicing of that group, who were interested in making the conversion over to the bhikkhuni form. And so that was how that conversion happened. And then Venerable Kachayana just mentioned 1,000 bhikkhunis regularly attending the ordination of Anula Devi's stupa. Well, you would not easily find 1,000 bhikkhunis getting together in Europe or North America, because we don't have 1,000 Theravada bhikkhunis in North America as of yet. But you have the numbers, you have the mass in Sri Lanka because of that welcome, and that welcome is conditioned by the gift of history. So the choice that was made in the ancient times to bring, when Anula and the royal ladies heard the Dhamma and requested the ordination, and when then Sanghamitta came and taught them, then that was their setting up the conditions. And so that causation, that cause and effect, has been rolling along for now 2,500 years at least. So may I read you a bit more from the Mahavamsa, the passage that we were reading this morning for the next chapter in the story of Sanghamitta? I'll take that as a yes. Okay. So here we go. In order to bring the great Bodhi tree and the elder nun, there will be Sanghamitta, the Lord of the world, that's the king or the viceroy of Sri Lanka, remembering the statement spoken by the elder on a certain day in the rainy season while sitting in his own city near the elder, consulted his ministers and urged his nephew, the minister called Aritta, to undertake these deeds. After considering it and inviting him, he uttered this statement: "Dear, after going into the presence of the king Dhammasoka, you will be able to bring the elder nun Sanghamitta and the great Bodhi tree here. I will be able, God King, to bring these two from there, if after returning here I am allowed to go forth, your honor. You may go, dear, and after bringing the elder nun together with the Bodhi tree and reaching Lanka, you can go forth according to your wish." Having said that, the king sent his nephew. He took the message of the elder and the king and worshipped him, leaving on the second day of the bright fortnight of the Asayuja moon, that will be in October. He boarded a ship on the port of Jambukola, crossed the ocean, and through the power of the elder's determination, on the very day of departure, he arrived in Pataliputta in the northwest corner of India. Then Queen Anula, with 500 young women, together with another 500 women of the harem, having undertaken the 10 precepts, pure in the yellow robes, being in training, looked forward to the going forth, looked for the coming of the elder nun. She made her dwelling in good conduct in a delightful nunnery in a certain district of the town, where the Lord of Men had had it made. As these lay women lived in the nunnery, it became well known throughout Lanka as the lay woman's monastery. Aritta, now known as Maha Aritta, reached King Dhammasoka, spoke of the king's message. The queen named Anula, your friend, the king Pietisa's brother's wife, O chief of kings, desiring the going forth, has undertaken the 10 precepts, together with 1,000 women, and lives constantly restrained. Please send the elder nun Sanghamitta to give the going forth, and together with her a branch from the south side of the great Bodhi tree. Then the minister went to the presence of the elder nun and said, "This noble sister, your brother Mahinda, sent me into your presence. Deva Nampietisa's brother's wife, the lay woman called Queen Anula, through having a desire of the going forth, together with 1,000 women, lives constantly restrained. Go together with me. Please give the going forth." Hearing the minister's words, she very quickly went to her father and the elder nun and related the elder's thoughts. "My brother Mahinda has sent these into my presence. After we send the people back, I will go. Very many people, daughters of good families, with Anula at their head, desiring the going forth, are looking forward to my journey. The king, hearing this statement, with a shower of tears set rolling, said, "My son Mahinda, dear, and my grandson Sumana, having left us here, I am as though with my hands cut off. They both have gone to the copper dust island. I no longer see them, and a great grief has arisen. Seeing their faces today, your grief will be allayed. But not seeing you also, dear, how will I put aside my grief in being parted from my son and grandson? Enough, dear, if you were to go today, you also will not return." And indeed, she didn't return. She spent the rest of her lifetime in Sri Lanka, teaching and supporting that Sangha of Bhikkhunis. Hearing this statement, Sanghamitta said, "My brother's word has importance for me, King, together with the request of the great queen and the 1,000 women. Further, I suppose this is not just my brother's word, and many are waiting for the going forth, which I also desire to give, great king. So now I must go." And so he gave permission. At the bright half of the Kartika moon, Asoka placed a branch of the great Bodhi tree to the east of the root of a lovely great Sala tree, and worshiping it day by day. On the 17th day, new shoots were starting to take hold and arose in the trunk of the delightful Bodhi tree. Seeing that, the Lord of the world, faithful and satisfied, with his 10 fingers raised in reverential salutation to his head, said, "I give it sovereignty over the whole of the Rose Apple Island." And the Lord of the world consecrated the great Bodhi tree with sovereignty. The novice Sumana, who was sent by Mahinda in order to take a relic of the teacher, together with his bowl, on the full moon day of the Kartika, flew through the sky and arrived in the delightful city of flowers. At that time, the great Bodhi tree had been placed at the root of the lovely Sala tree. And in that place, he saw them worshiping with the offerings at the Kartika festival. The Lord of the planet placed a guard around the Bodhi tree and dwelt near it together with his council of ministers. All the women of the harem with Sanghamitta at their head went out from the city and worshipped it with all sorts of offerings, and they dwelt near the great Bodhi tree together with their husband. The worship of the beautiful, noble, excellent Bodhi tree, with many extensive flags, flowers, and fruits at its head, opened the minds of men and the protective gods, like a lotus opened by the rays of the sun, without any effort on its part. The blossoming flowers and the lakes of Pataliputta delighted the minds of the people and the protective gods. After emitting 6 colorful rays in the sky and on the ground, instilling faith in the people, it dwelt there like an awakened one. So this was called the acquisition of the Bodhi tree. I may summarize this next section because this is what was just reviewed by Ayatollah in her talk. They appointed 18 royal families from aristocratic groups, Brahmanical families, merchant families. I'm sorry, not just from aristocratic families. 8 Brahminical families, 8 merchant families, 8 of the foremost faithful cowherders, families of the sparrow weavers. These may be clan names. and then potters' families. And hyena families, 8 of each, were also appointed. We don't know the significance of the hyena families. That may have been a clan name. He sent the Nagas and Yakas together in this tremendous protective group. The ruler of men, surrounded by his army, dismissing them, went immediately with his elephants, horses, and chariots, crossing through the jungles. Called Vijaya the forest, he arrived at Tamalita within 7 days, traveled through India. Many assembled along the highway to see the procession with the Bodhi tree. King Asoka placed the great Bodhi tree on the bank of the great ocean and worshipped it for 7 days. He consecrated it with sovereignty. He raised the great Bodhi tree with help given from all of these families. With all kinds of offerings, he descended into the water up to his neck and established it properly on the ship and invited the great Sanghamitta with 11 other nuns into the ship with various offerings. These nuns are named in the Dipavamsa, which is another historical text, to do an ordination, to have a dual ordination, there should be a sangha of 10 bhikkhunis. But outside of the central India area, there's an exception to the rule that allows an ordination to be done with as few as 5. But here, to make the most honorable and irreproachable kind of ordination, they had this full sangha of 12. Again, Asoka is lamenting tearfully, saying, "Alas, the Bodhi tree of the virtuous one, the one of 10 powers, while it is still emitting a net of 20 colored rays, we have gladly given it up." He made a reverent salutation with his head, seeing the elder nuns, and then he stood depressed on the bank with a shower of tears rolling while watching the ship with the great Bodhi tree on board going from the multitude. The colored lotuses blossomed in the firmament. Heavenly music played. Manifold offerings were made by the gods and the Nagas. Nagas sometimes refers to snakes, and sometimes it refers to sea beings who live under the sea. The Nagas worked magic in order to seize the Bodhi tree. But Sanghamitta, who had the strength of psychic powers, took the form of a Supana, which is a traditional mythical enemy of the Nagas, and frightened the great snakes. Trembling and fearful, seeing the spiritual power and splendor of the elder nun, they worshipped at the elder's feet with their heads and begged for their lives, saying, "Don't be angry with us, noble sister, on this journey today. There will be no obstacle for you. You will be safe. We have come in order to ask for the Bodhi tree." She gave the Bodhi tree to the Nagas to worship, and they took the great Bodhi tree to the dragon's abode. They worshipped it with various offerings and gave it sovereignty over the Naga realm for 7 days. Then they brought it back and placed it back on the ship. It describes the arrival and the reception by the king, the way that the highway was decorated and strewn with cloth and silver. We have in these ancient texts, as we also see in some of the canonical stories, especially in the commentarial stories, Queen Visakha was the most powerful laywoman and one of the greatest lay disciples of the Buddha. Queen Visakha has the most tremendously elaborate description of the amount of super wealth that was brought as gifts at the time of her marriage. It was so much that it almost like ruined the city, because there were like so many cattle and so much gold and so much wheat and so much rice and so many people that came together. And Lady Visakha had a parure, which was a kind of a jeweled vest that had been made for her as part of her dowry. And it was so heavy with all of the precious metals and precious jewels that it took 6 strong men to lift it. But she was able to wear it very easily, because she had that superhuman strength. Lady Visakha had 20 children, and each one of her children had 20 children, and each one of her grandchildren had 20 children. So that by the time, you can do the math, by the time she was elderly, there was this, fantastically huge tribe of descendants. In our modern times, we've got a more of a negative connotation to the great disparity in wealth, and the idea that for some people to have such fantastic wealth like that is done at the expense of the tremendous poverty and oppression of the masses. But as far as I understand it, in the Buddhist text, there was not that kind of a negative connotation that the wealth and abundance of the king or of the aristocrats necessarily was implying the poverty of the people. Rather the opposite, that the kings were generous and did social welfare for persons. King Asoka was well known for establishing places where travelers could get water and grain for their cattle or their horses. He established libraries. He established a program whereby farmers could have loans in order to be able to plant their harvest. And so his wealth was also distributed to the country to create the wealth of the country. I also realized that it's possible that because of history, in the ancient times, the earth itself was so much more abundant than it is now. The sea would be jumping with fish, and the rivers would be jumping with fish. The jungle would be abundant with all different kinds of fruits and roots and nuts and different kinds of things, so that a person could very easily, in those olden times, just go into the jungle and just pick some fruit from the trees and very easily have enough. So there wasn't this kind of stressful poverty that we've exhausted what nature has to give. And therefore, there's a very significant kind of a metaphor that this super extravagant abundance of wealth is a metaphor for a happiness, true happiness that comes from happiness. There's another sutta in the Digha Nikaya about King Sudama, who is a mythological king who has tremendous wealth. He has one castle covered with emeralds and one castle covered with diamonds and one castle covered with beryl. So the different color of the different gems in the different castles. And he's got he makes watering bathing ponds for the people to enjoy, to take a bath. And the stairway going down to the bathing place, there's one stairway which is a silver stairway with golden railings, and another one is a golden stairway with silver railings, and another one is a diamond stairway with emerald railings, and so on, like that, with all this extravagant language. And then this wise King Sudama undertakes meditation, and he meditates on impermanence and does the reflection that all of this wealth, all of this comfort, all of this fantastic beauty are all impermanent. And based on his contemplation of impermanence, he goes beyond any kind of greed or grasping or holding to that wealth, and becomes ready to let it go. And so then, from the happiness and comfort of that beautiful, rich life, he goes to the even greater happiness and comfort of letting go of that beautiful, rich life. In this historical story, we see that actually King Asoka is not yet there because he's grieving and sad and weeping to be separated from his beloved children. But the children, Sanghamitta, Sumana, grandson, and Mahinda all become fully enlightened, and they all are completely released from any kind of grief. So you may think sometimes that a person could come to the Dhamma because they experience a tremendous loss, tremendous hardship, tremendous suffering. They experience trauma. They even become insane because of the trauma they've experienced. And then through their encounter with the Dhamma, they're able to emerge from that sadness and trauma and to regain their balance and regain their sanity. That's sort of like one path is coming from trauma or coming from intense dukkha to happiness. But then there is this other path, which is going from happiness to happiness, that goes from the happiness of having enough, being loved, being comfortable, being in a pleasant world, being like in a heavenly world. And even from heaven, it's possible to have the insight into impermanence and to let go of all of it and to come to awakening. So this is my understanding of some of the ways to make sense, like why is it significant? Why is it important to include all of these crazy details about this tremendous amount of abundance and wealth that was happening along this spiritual journey. So I believe that it's symbolic of the bliss of enlightenment, and not symbolic of the double-edged sword of wealth. That could be the wealth of a miser. That could be a cause of misery instead of a cause of happiness. I think I may pause here and ask if there are any comments or questions about the story so far. Okay. Would you like to talk to the microphone so they can hear your question?
Thank you for the wonderful sharing and story. I was wondering, is there a special reason why Sri Lanka was chosen to be the place for Venerable Mahinda as well as Arhan Sanghamitta to propagate the Dhamma?
My impression is there's a story that if there's some kind of a contest, that the winner gets to write the history. And in the case of Sri Lanka, there came to be this very special dedication to creating the text, the Pali text, the written down version of the complete canon of all of the sutras of the Buddha, as well as the Abhidhamma and the Vinaya. So this was actually much later, around the near the beginning of the Christian era. There had been a period of decline when, because of war and famine, that the monks were in a state of hardship, and it was starting to seem to be unreliable. whether there would be enough bhikkhus to be able to reliably memorize and remember through an oral tradition to accurately carry down the transmission. So then this tremendous project arose to write down the text and to save both the canonical text and also the earlier generation of the commentaries. These were not the commentaries that were being written around that time, around the beginning of the Common Era, because that, like learning and scholarship had been sort of deteriorated, but they had recalled the text that had happened in the previous hundreds of years. And so I think it could be that because of having written down their history, and also because Sri Lanka had the Dipavamsa, which was an earlier version of the history of Sri Lanka that had been written by the well-educated bhikkhunis, and that gave a strong prominence to the story of what happened with the bhikkhunis, and as well the Mahavamsa, which was this a very large, you can look it up, it's like several volumes of books in the Mahavamsa, that this all was composed and written in Sri Lanka. So there were missions to other parts of the world that were not accompanied by such a voluminous and complete saving of the text. And I think it's because of the presence of the preservation of the text that the story came to be remembered, particularly in connection to Sri Lanka. Yeah.
Thank you for the deep knowledge. So I think it's believed that both Venerable Mahinda and Arhan Sanghamitta, they're the child of King Ashoka. So like when he sent the mission, I mean like the Arhans to go on a mission, like I'm not sure if they're related to King Ashoka at all, and it seems like only both of them are. So is this also like part of the historical capturing something when they're
I'm not completely familiar with the earliest missions that went to, for example, to Siam or to modern Thailand, but I know that there was a mission that went on an overland route to Siam, and then there was another mission that went to the northwest India, and another mission that went to Avanti and the western coast of India, where there's a very famous caves, Mahabharata caves. And then as well, you had earlier travelers from China, Faxian, and other great scholars who had made this fantastic. This is a whole other pilgrimage you could do. We could have another wonderful evening just understanding the journey of Faxian and his multi-year travels through the deserts and all the dangers to get to India and to study and learn some of the texts and then to carry them back to China. So it's not the only story. Here's the chapter about Sanghamitta and the nunneries. Near the Lord's great Bodhi tree, through the wonder of being near the flag of the true Dhamma, preached in the lovely words of the land of Lanka, Queen Anula with the 500 women, and together with another 500 women of the harem, received the going forth in the presence of the elder Sanghamitta. And those 1,000 nuns, after developing insight, in no long time attained the state of worthiness, that is, they became arahants. The great elder Sanghamitta lived in the nunnery known as the laywoman's monastery, together with her sangha. She made there 3 dwelling places, which were considered the foremost. Previously, Queen Anula had heard a Dhamma teaching in the elder Mahinda's presence, understood the truths, donned the yellow robes, undertook the 10 precepts, and made her dwelling there, in the home of a minister named Dolaka. This is a confusing point, what the connection is between Dolaka's resident and the laywoman's monastery. It's an unsolved mystery. The footnote here mentions that Queen Anula had heard some teachings from the Satya Samyutta, and then elsewhere I've heard on multiple occasions, that most famously the Mahahatipadopama Sutta, the elephant's footprint, is the first teaching that Mahinda gave, that was heard by both the men and the women. With the coming of the elder nun to the island of Lanka, these 3 foremost places were called the small chapter, the great chapter, and increasing splendor. Buildings were built for the benefit of his retinue and many others in the palace. When the great Bodhi tree was brought in the ship, the ruler of the world had the mast placed in the house named the small chapter. The sail was established in the great chapter house, and the rudder was placed in the increasing splendor house. So these 3 artifacts of the journey were placed, and this will be the first museum in history that's been documented. I'm sure there were other museums wherever there were great kings who had great adventures and collected souvenirs. The Lord of the world was of such a kind that he was endowed with virtue and respect for the 3 treasures, paid lifelong respect to the Bodhi tree, and caused all the places on the isle to be prepared, gaining a famous name lasting even to this day. The king's state elephant, which wandered wherever it liked, stayed on one side of the city in a cool spot in the mountain grotto near the Kadampapupa bush where it grazed. Other people journeyed there after seeing the elephant, seeing how the elephant delights in the Kadampa grove, fed it with rice, and fattened up the elephant. And that place came to be known by the name, the measure of grain, because people would like to go and give a measure of grain to the elephant. But one day, the elephant didn't take even a morsel, and the king asked the elder who brought faith to the island the reasons. Near the Kadampapupa bush site, he desires that a sanctuary be built, said the great elder to the great king. The king, who was ever delighted in the welfare of the people, quickly built a sanctuary there, together with a relic and a sanctuary room. Then the great elder Sanghamitta, who longed for an empty abode, as the dwelling place she lived in was crowded, seeking the benefit of the dispensation and the welfare of the nuns, being wise and desiring another nunnery, went to that lovely shrine house, which was comfortably secluded, and spent the day there, she who had faultless skill in dwellings. The king, after going to the first nunnery to worship the elder nun, heard that she had left the place. He departed from the nunnery, arrived near the shrine house, and worshipped the great elder. After exchanging greetings with the elder Sanghamitta, understanding her intention, the guardian of the world, who was a wise man, skilled in intention, a hero of great power, had a delightful nunnery built near the sanctuary house. The nunnery was built near where the elephant took his measure of grain. Therefore, it became known as the Elephant's Measure Monastery. Sanghamitta has the meaning the friend of the Sangha. Amita is a friend. Sanghamitta, the good friend, Sanghamitta, who was greatly wise, then made her dwelling there, benefiting the world, accomplished, endowed with various wonders. She remained a long time. After the king Devanampiyatissa's passing, his younger brother, called Uttiya, ruled righteously. The elder Mahinda was the light of Lanka, the leader of a great crowd, who led up the island of Lanka, who propagated the supreme dispensation of the Buddha, consisting of proper study, practice, and penetration. He who was like a teacher, benefiting many in the world of Lanka, with a virtuous crowd of wise monks in the Sangha. In the 8th victorious year of the king Uttiya, within the rain's retreat, after he had dwelt 60 years near the Chaitya mountains, on the 8th day of the bright half of the month of Asayuja, that passionless elder who increased the light attained emancipation. That's the Mahaparinibbana, the end of the physical life. As the passionless Mahinda passed on the 8th day, it was agreed upon his name is given to the 8th day. So within the lunar cycle, the 8th day of each lunar month is given Mahinda's name. King Uttiya was affected by the dart of grief. He worshipped and lamented the elder a great deal. He had him laid out in a golden casket, placed it on a golden bier, lifted it, made ceremonies. A great flood of people who come together made offerings. They carried the bier to the great monastery, placed it on a decorated bier. The whole island was decorated in honor of Mahinda by the power of the gods.
I don't want to watch TV anymore. If you want me up here, turn it off.
Hello? Then Sanghamitta fulfilled all of the duties of the dispensation with virtue and wisdom. She benefited many people in Lanka. 9 years after the beginning of the reign of King Uttiya, 59 years after arriving in Sri Lanka, while residing in the Elephant's Measure House, this light of the world passed away. Hearing that, King Uttiya, affected by the dart of grief with a shower of tears set rolling, went out with his assembly just as for the elder Mahinda, and again made the supreme offerings, paid respect to the elder nun for a week in that place, and decorated the whole of Lanka as for the elder Mahinda. After 7 days, the body was placed on top of a bier, led around the city with an assembly of guardians of the world, laid near the eastern Bodhi tree on the eastern side of the sanctuary. And as we saw in Ayatataloka's presentation, that her relics were deposited there in the sanctuary near the Bodhi tree. The other great elders also passed away. The 12 elder nuns, beginning with Sanghamitta, passed away. King Uttiya made his reign for 10 years. Then, being oppressed by disease, he attained a state of impermanence, so he also passed away. That man who, knowing that impermanence is very violent, strong, and unstoppable, doesn't grow weary of coming to existence, and being tired of it, doesn't have disgust for wicked things, and doesn't delight in meritorious things because of the strength of his great delusion. He is one who, although knowing the truth, forgets it. Ooh, that's a scary thought. So King Uttiya did not become fully awakened. So these are the translations of the extended versions of the Mahavamsa. I would emphasize here that we don't, in our practice as bhikkhus or bhikkhunis, we don't make a vow of stability the way that the Catholic monastics do. So in Catholicism, or perhaps in some other traditions, a person might enter into a convent and make the vow that they're going to stay inside the walls of that convent for the rest of their life, or inside the walls of that hermitage or that monastery for the rest of their life. That's a particular kind of practice. But the practice that the Buddha recommended for us was this practice of wandering. It seems to be that because the bhikkhunis were vulnerable to certain dangers from thugs and rapists, that they tended to have their monasteries located either in the town or at the edge of the town or in a suburb rather close to the town, and not to be wandering in the uninhabited places in between the towns. But nevertheless, we have in the Bhikkhuni Sangha, there's a practice that after the end of the 3 months of the Vasa, it's a requirement that the Bhikkhunis should take a journey and not just be stabilized and sticking in one place. Sanghamitta must have been caring for the Bhikkhuni Sangha throughout the island of Sri Lanka. She must have been something like the mother or the grandmother to that tremendous assembly of many thousands of nuns who were practicing, cultivating, and developing there at the monasteries throughout that island. And her 11 companions then also must have been fully accomplished with their special kinds of wisdom and their special talents for teaching and nurturing and bringing up and caring for their Sangha. So we happen so far here in the West, a lot of Theravada monastics do not have the benefit of living in a large community led by a very qualified, well-educated, accomplished senior teacher. Instead, we have bhikkhunis living in small house temples scattered about, with maybe only one bhikkhuni living and supported by lay people, or possibly two bhikkhunis, or three bhikkhunis, or two bhikkhunis and a novice or a trainee living someplace, being supported by lay people. It's a wonderful a gift, and I'll have to say a testimonial to Taloka's willpower, that at least here at this place, we have regularly 4 or 5 bhikkhunis present throughout the year, and during the range retreats, some of our students who've gone out and traveled here and there may come back, and it's been quite normal for us during the range retreat to have 8 or 9 or 10 bhikkhunis living together and practicing together. There is a tremendous multiplier when people are staying together who are sharing the same aspiration, the same goals, the same set of values. When living together, it's not so much necessary to continuously negotiate about what kind of a culture we want to have in our community, because there's such a powerful and strong tradition that we're inheriting. And so then when we decided to follow this path, to follow the path of the bhikkhunis, we decided to undertake this culture, even when some aspects of the monastic culture are not well matching to the modern world. Like the rule about being barefooted, because in ancient times wearing shoes was a sign of wealth and luxury, and a normal person would be barefooted, and so we wanted not to be luxurious, and so we've got this kind of standard. Well, that's not quite important in the same way anymore, and yet somehow by taking on board as much as we are able to of the ancient pattern, as well as we can understand it, then we are expressing with our body the intention to put our minds and hearts in alignment with the Dhamma. And there is something that can be quite transformative when we have the possibility of living a life which is simplified and in accord with that long tradition. So even though the world around us may be filled with diamonds and silvers and golds and elephants and flags and decorations and musicians and, you know, all kind of these wonderful things that we ourselves are living in a way which is utterly simple. And we know that preserving a tradition doesn't happen unless you have some practitioners who have got a very powerful determination, like a backs as strong as steel, in the determination to uphold and be faithful to the traditions, and not to just wander and waver and compromise and go along with the flow of how things are going along in the world, but instead to remember and respect these traditions. This is, in a certain way, what I imagine that 59 years of having the presence of such an accomplished Arhat Bhikkhuni as Sanghamitta must have meant for the first generation of the nuns who were there in Sri Lanka, the first level of converts. At the beginning here in the USA, many Western women of various kinds of backgrounds who had the idea of entering into the monastic form and undertook those precepts, undertook those vows. Our backgrounds were like so diversified, and it's not easy to read a book and understand how the deportment and the practice of a monastic is supposed to be held. It's not easy to have 3 or 4 women who are reading a book and only once in a while having the opportunity to be in the presence and to learn from somebody who's a very mature, well-seasoned, well-developed monastic who has really understands monastic culture because they've got a longer connection, and a connection that's rooted in the home ground of Buddhism in the Asian homeland. And so I can just imagine how it could have been for that first generation of Sri Lankan women trying to become bhikkhunis. It could have been really wild, with like so much diversity of people, like what people assume is how it ought to be, or how to understand, how to interpret, with a certain amount of like willfulness and you know, bumping and a discussion, but having the presence of that group of elders who's carrying the longer tradition, who got that really strong grounding in the tradition, really the direct connection to the tradition, that is very helpful, very powerful. It's not that we say that those teachers are like a guru, that there's some kind of like a magical transmission that's happening from the guru to the disciple. But we are saying that the effort to keep our practice in line with what the Buddha taught is a very challenging question, and it's a blessing when we have these kind of examples to be followed, to be appreciated. I may again call on the Aranya Bodhi and see if there's any thought that you would like to share.
Sorry, I have a lot of background noise here because of the generator on, so
It's
maybe
not
a
coming
little bit,
through.
I'm gonna turn. Okay. Um, uh, yes, I think just appreciating what you were sharing about the power of living in a community, of having elders who can be an example for those, you know, like me who are more junior, and to have the power of that transmission. I appreciate that. I think it's a very strong thing, and you know, we're grateful to find it because it's also rare in the world. And so, you know, honoring all the elders, the whole series, back to Sanghamitta, back to the Buddha. Like, so what would we do if we didn't have that, though? Because there's so many places in the world where we don't have that strength of lineage, and we can look to the examples. We can look for inspiration. You know, even just the painting or the photo or the you know, even just the name or the story or something can be a great inspiration. You know, sometimes that's all it takes, I think, for somebody to, you know, be inspired and get started on the way, and then you know, to go find the place where you know, that can be supported, whatever way it can be supported. Um, so I think I'm just appreciating on many levels the power of this story of Sanghamitta as just a symbol, as an inspiration, and also what you've been pointing to about really establishing something strong in Sri Lanka at that time that has been able to carry forward, and that we're still feeling the benefit of today. So on all those levels, appreciating this. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Mm. And if not, I would be pleased to simply close this portion of the program with the simple puja. And we here are intending to continue our meditation. You're welcome to join us for that as long as you like. We're going to be practicing sitting and walking meditation up until 11:45, and then we'll be doing some extra chanting, blessing for the new year. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami.